Hi, everybody. The question I'm going to answer today is what is microdosing and is it effective? For those of you new to the channel, my name is Dr. B and I'm with the American Addiction Institute of Mind and Medicine. On this channel, we discuss all things substance abuse. If you like our content, please subscribe and press the like button. And if you're so inclined, we would appreciate a contribution to our Patreon account to support our endeavor. Let's get started. The question essentially asks, what is microdosing and is it effective? Microdosing, essentially it refers to taking much smaller doses of a compound or element than is usually taken for euphoric effects or getting high recreationally. In general, nowadays, it seems to refer mainly to LSD and mushrooms, but it can also refer to things like ayahuasca, DMT, marijuana, or really any other substance. A place we can consider as a starting point is Silicon Valley, and you can look up a name of a Dr. James Fadiman. He's a psychologist, psychedelic researcher, and he wrote the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide about 2010, 2011. And again, he's from the Silicon Valley, and I guess he's the modern day psychedelic version of Timothy Leary. And it became very popular, the concept and the use of microdosing psychedelics in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. And it really kind of spread rapidly to the East Coast. It seems to be quite popular with the millennials and the new generation. And the claim is the use of this is not to escape reality like traditional drug use is, but rather to enhance reality. The claims out there for the utility of it is quite popular in the Silicon Valley. The claims for its utility, as it has become popular, are enhances creativity, it enhances mood, it enhances productivity. You're starting to also see claims for its utility in anxiety and depression. My suspicion is in a short period of time, as there's nothing new under the sun and trends move forward as all trends do, people will start to have claims and anecdotal reports about its utility for all kinds of things. And in fact, there's also some claims about its utility for treating substance abuse. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot more in terms of pain management, PTSD, and all sorts of mood disorders, mental health issues, substance issues, existential issues, and so forth. They do that with regular medications like gabapentin and its off-label use, but I can see this happening with this sort of new trend, and if it becomes commercialized and legalized without running through the whole gamut of real evidence-based validation, like marijuana, it will be used for everything under the sun. That's my feeling and position on the way this will go. Already, I see on some of my social media accounts, any issue that's brought up might be neuropathic pain, it might be alcoholism, it might be cocaine abuse, it might be severe anxiety, and somebody suggests the answer, this sort of magic solution that's out there that no one's utilizing, is microdosing of psychedelics. So that's where I kind of see it going. As I said, it spread from San Francisco to New York. It's starting to spread across the planet. Now, the really important question is, does it work? Does it work for any of these things Does it work for a single one of these things? Does it increase productivity, mood, and so forth? And how does it work? Okay. And the answer that I'm trying to convey here, and I think this is a great situation, because what we're usually doing is Monday morning quarterbacking and answering these questions on hindsight. Let me give you an example. When benzodiazepines really took off and became popularized in the 70s and 80s across the world, you can pull up ads right now and start to see that they were sort of promoted for everything: mild depression, woman's hysteria, anxiety, the blues, and they're non-addicting, and they were sort of promoted for everything. And then we sort of reality bit, and we got a hold of ourselves and understood what was really going on. Even if you look at the history of some of the drugs that we have out there, morphine was discovered early in the 18th century, or rather, it wasn't discovered. It was the first chemical isolation and extract of a plant, the opium poppy, and it's the most active ingredient in terms of euphoria or getting high from the opium poppy. And one of the things that it was immediately marketed for by Merck Pharmaceuticals, many of you have heard of Merck Manual of Medicine, was the treatment of opium addiction. Now, ironically, opium addiction occurs because the most active ingredient in there is morphine. And so what you ended up having in the US is a scourge of morphine addiction, one of the first real modern addictions in this country, caused by a pharmaceutical company. And it eventually translated into the Civil War and its effects, called soldier's disease, which was severe withdrawals from morphine addiction. So what I'm trying to say here is, here we have something that's on the cusp of kind of becoming a really, really major cultural phenomena. And before we jump into it, let's really ask the correct questions instead of buying into the cultural hysteria and hype, and we get ourselves into the same troubles that we've gotten into with opiates in the last 25 years. Before that, it was stimulant medication on a couple of occasions in the 30s, in the 60s, and I just told you about another one, which was morphine, which is an opiate, during the mid-1800s. And so, going back to the question, does this stuff work? Does it do what it's supposed to do for all of those things? Creativity, productivity, mood, and extending it to anxiety, depression, and so forth. And here's the answer that I can give to the best of what I can find. Studies are happening, some in Europe, some have already happened, some in Canada, and they seem kind of promising for what they're doing. But those studies are grossly limited by the design and the population groups they use, and I don't want to go into some of the details in giving us our final answer, and you have to be really careful. In fact, one of the things that's being considered by one of the critics of some of these studies is the placebo effect of the participants, not just in the studies, one of these was in the Netherlands, but the people that are taking it and expecting a positive outcome. And a study was actually designed to look at this, and it showed some significance mathematically in proving that point. And here's where we stand. We don't really formally know in the way that we are supposed to know. I am not knocking this down as a possible therapeutic benefit in a lot of these areas. I'm simply being truthful and saying we don't know, and we should proceed with caution with all the media hype and all the cultural hype that's out there. For example, if you are someone that suffers from some sort of a mental disorder that could potentially propel you into psychosis, including schizophrenia type disorders, how does this work in that population? How does this work on the elderly? Okay. How does this work on people younger than 16 years old? Which drug are we talking about? Are we talking about acid or are we talking about mushrooms? What exactly is the right microdose for which one of these? What are the long-term effects and consequences? What if you have other conditions, in particular psychiatric ones, and if you take it with one of these in a prolonged period of time? How safe is safe? At what dose? How often? And which drug? So, as people write on the internet or forums or on my social media promoting microdosing of psychedelics, I want you all to kind of step back and proceed with a lot of caution, as the answers take time. On the other hand, and again, I am not knocking this stuff down because I myself am a great proponent of some of these psychedelics in terms of, and it's happening right now, the research for this stuff for things like PTSD, complex PTSD, dealing psychologically with end of life issues, dealing psychologically with a devastating illness of a loved one, and doing this together in a therapeutic environment. So I'm a big proponent of us to continue research into psychedelics in general. And maybe this movement also shows another thing. It shows, on a positive side, it shows the vacuum and the need for moving more rapidly on evaluation of psychedelics and their therapeutic benefit versus their abuse potential and harm. It just really shows that this is what the public is interested in. There seems to be something there, so they need to get moving on evaluating this stuff. On the darker side, it shows something else. It shows that continuous greed and self-promotion and marketing and really propaganda of products for the sake of making a buck, as I am sure there's many companies, both in their research and development and in the distribution of this stuff, that have a very deeply vested interest in this. I believe one of the countries, in fact, in Europe, is this is legal, and there's growers of magic mushrooms that make a living off of this. So what we have here is something called microdosing. That's what we know. We don't know exactly what that dose is, 1/20th to 1/10th. And again, there's a book by James Fadiman, a psychologist from Silicon Valley, and it's called Psychedelic Explorer Guide, that he gives a lot of recommendations, and he's been doing a lot of his research. But systemically, we, as a group, in terms of the research community and sort of FDA approvals, whatever you think of them, we don't know what dose we're talking about. We don't necessarily know which drug we're talking about. And even then, we don't know the frequency, long-term effects, which segments in the population this could have a negative or a positive effect on, and for what issue does it exactly work on. Should I take something for creativity or productivity if there's any risks to my health or potential consequences? And so at that point, you really want to evaluate the benefits versus the risk. It's just a quick summary of this issue and popular thing that's popping up in the culture. called Microdosing, and it refers to psychedelics. If you did enjoy the video, please click above to my left, and there are other videos that you may enjoy. If you really enjoyed it, please go ahead, subscribe, and press the like button, and see you guys soon.